Welcome to Stuck in Neutral Radio with your host, CJ.
I hate my job.
Got a wrecked bucket of fuck.
I'm so pissed off right now I can't see straight.
Ooh, screwed over the meltdown on the radio.
Ooh! Call for TV, people. All here for the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stuck in Neutral Radio here on March 21st, 2023. It is episode 6. I've been doing this for 6 weeks now, and I'm proud of myself for making it 6 weeks. Hope you all enjoyed this past weekend's races. Not too much to really discuss as far as stuff from last week. We'll get into, obviously, all the Hendrick motorsport stuff and all the penalties and all that other stuff, but just want to let everybody know that starting next week, all of the podcasts will start to hopefully go up on other mediums. I'll have it officially announced for next week's show, but the plan is to have it hopefully up on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, anywhere I can possibly upload these podcasts, just audio-wise. The plan is to start uploading them there as well. I will also take all of the archived episodes, so 1 through 5 that have been getting put up the last month or so, and they will all go up as well, so won't be able to lose track, and hopefully everybody will go back and enjoy those podcasts as well if you'd like to. But to previously, let's go back and talk about the news from the previous week. The only major news that really came out of last week is, obviously, it's been a while. It kind of feels like old news just because of the way that my podcasts usually come out. They come out on Tuesdays. So, again, you'll be hearing this on Tuesday, most likely afternoon. And the way that these penalties have been getting dished out and when they get dished out is usually on Tuesdays in the afternoon after my podcast has already been recorded and put up on YouTube. But let's still discuss this really quickly. The major news that came out of last week was obviously the 2 huge penalties that were dished out to both Colleague Racing and Hendrick Motorsports. And then obviously the penalty that was dished out to Danny Hamlin. For anybody who's been living under a rock, the penalties to HMS and Colleague, the biggest, I believe it's the biggest fine in NASCAR history to a team ever. $400,000 HMS was fined, $100,000 for each of their 4 teams. I did discuss on last week's podcast the louvers being confiscated from NASCAR from both HMS and Colleague Racing. The penalties were then dished out, I believe it was Tuesday afternoon? Question mark? I want to say it was Tuesday. It was pretty soon after my podcast had went up. But the penalties, as we saw last year, when Brad Keselowski got penalized for pretty much tinkering with factory parts that he's not allowed to tinker with, had a $100,000 fine. I want to say it was 100 regular season points and 10 playoff points, which is what Brad Keselowski, I believe, got docked last year. Same thing this year for all parties involved there. Like I said earlier, HMS got fined in a total of $400,000, which sounds like a lot of money. They got docked 100 points each, or 100 regular season points each. So coming into Phoenix, or excuse me, coming out of Phoenix, technically, Alex Bowman was the points leader. And obviously, that knocks him down to well into the 20s. William Byron, Kyle Larson, the same thing. The only thing that it really doesn't affect, I believe, is Chase Elliott. Now, a lot of people were asking the question on Twitter and such of, does this mean that Chase Elliott gets penalized 100 points because it's technically his ride in the 9 car, just Josh Berry filling in? And does he get docked the 100 points and the 10 playoff points? Because if that's the case, that would have been absolutely huge, especially for him, because he's not here for the next how many weeks or so still, because he's still out. Obviously, kudos to Bob Pockrass. He was the one I saw correct it. But since Chase was not actively in the car of the week that the parts got confiscated, he does not get docked the penalty or the points penalties, either playoff or regular season points. So he's safe as far as getting docked points there. But the other three guys, Kyle Larson, William Byron, and Alex Bowman, they got docked 100 regular season points and then 10 playoff points each. Colleague Racing got the same thing. Justin Haley had his louvers confiscated, so he had $100,000 for his team. He ended up having 100 regular season points docked, and then obviously the 10 playoff points as well. What was funny is I don't know if I've ever seen somebody, and maybe somebody can go back in the annals of history and correct me on this. I don't know if I've ever actually seen somebody with negative points, like ever. Because Brad Keselowski, I want to say, was still in the positive when he got docked his 100 points. I might be incorrect on that, but I have never seen, as far as I can recollect, a driver with negative points. And it's not like, negative 20 or negative 10. These like negative 40 points. So if he had not even raced a single race this entire season, he would be in a better position than he is right now, points-wise. Which is insane to think about. Regardless, though, my opinion on the penalties, first let's talk about Colleague Racing. Colleague, again, I know this is old news, but I just want to get this up and out of the way. Obviously, all the major news is from what happened at Atlanta this past weekend, and trust me, we'll get into all that, and I'll have plenty of hot takes about stuff that happened this past weekend in Atlanta. But as far as the Colleague Racing thing goes, Colleague Racing is the one that suffered the most by far, for multiple reasons. One, it is a smaller team. Colleague Racing is a smaller and newer team, and it doesn't have the financial structure and the amount of money that HMS has in these racing teams that Colleague Racing does. Now, I don't know how much money Matt Colleague is worth. I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars he has to his name. I don't know how financially stable he is or financially stable that team is. I have no idea. As far as I know, the only person who really knows is anybody who is associated with Colleague Racing and Matt Colleague himself. As far as I know, those are the only people who actually know how financially stable that team is. I don't think that the $100,000 fine is going to kill Matt Colleague's racing team and really hurt him for the rest of the season. But it is still, I believe, a pretty big hit, especially for that team. Also, the 100 points, 100 regular season points, and the 10 playoff points, not so much the 10 playoff points, but those 100 regular season points absolutely kill Justin Haley's season. As it did for Brad Keselowski last season, when Brad Keselowski got docked those 100 points, 100 regular season points, he had to win or he was out of the playoffs. He had no shot at making the playoffs if he did not win a race. Same thing goes for Justin Haley here, obviously. But in my opinion, I don't think that if you look across the landscape of all the drivers right now, especially after what we've seen for the last, 4 or 5 weeks of racing, Justin Haley is not somebody that we're pointing to see some surprise winner. If you ask me, the guys who are looking to see, surprise winners, quote unquote, Brad Keselowski looks like one guy. Corey LaJoie looks like one guy, maybe. Other small end teams. His teammate AJ Allmendinger, I would venture to say that he probably has a better chance of winning this season by far over Justin Haley. Justin Haley, for the last how many weeks to start the season, and even last season, he's been struggling. It's been rough to watch him try to make his way through the field and try and race these guys. It's a struggle for that 31 car. And you would have hoped that he would have made some type of improvement from last year to this year, and it does not look like that. In all honesty, it looks like he just stayed in the same... Again, it's very early, but it looks like right now he stayed in the exact same spot speed-wise as far as everybody else. He has not made any improvements. Whereas you see a guy like Brad Kay, who last year, pretty damn bad. But so far this year, you can see the improvement across the board. even in all these races. And I'll get to Brad again later on. But you can see the improvement. This Kaulig Racing team, I don't know what their issue is, and more specifically, I don't know what Justin Haley's issue is, because although AJ Allmendinger isn't lighting the world on fire, you can see the speed that he can possibly have, and you can have confidence that now as we head into COTA this weekend, that AJ Allmendinger might be able to have a good run. I don't have any confidence in Justin Haley as far as winning races or as far as having speed or even contending or having a chance to win races, not even at these super speedways. I don't even look at the super speedways now, and Justin Haley, when he did race in the Xfinity Series, now granted it's Xfinity Series, Cup Series, two different worlds, I get that, but you could see that he had talent at super speedway racing in the Xfinity Series. You could see it. He finished fairly well. As a matter of fact, again, I know it was a rain delay, but I'm going to take this because it's out there. Justin Haley has won a Cup Series race before. Again, it was rain-shortened, and it was because he stayed down on a pit call, and a lot of other guys came in and took tires and fuel and stuff to try and make it to the end because they wouldn't have made it to the end on fuel, but then it ended up raining, and then called the race, and Justin Haley ended up winning because of that. I get that that's not, fair, and it's, kind of a toss-up, but a win's a win, and Justin Haley has won in the Cup Series. So as far as the Kaulig Racing thing goes, it kills that 31-car season. There's no way they're going to points their way into the playoffs now, obviously. They'd have to win. I don't have confidence that they'd win. And not only that, but you have to think that even if they aren't going to make the playoffs, if they're going to try to have as best a finish as they can points-wise, it again kills their season points-wise. So it not only kills their season points-wise, but it also hurts them financially in the other way that they're not going to have a great finish points-wise either. Guys who are closer, higher up in the standings get paid more money than the guys who finish, farther down the list. So it hurts them financially in that sense as well. So Justin Haley's season, I don't want to say it's over, but this is pretty much a lost season now for that 31 car. Now, as far as HMS goes, everyone is probably, I don't see a giant freak out about the penalty and such. Everyone's like, obviously, it's like, oh man, that's a huge penalty. It's historic fine, and it really hurts them points wise and everything like that, and blah blah blah. They lost 100 points regular season, the 10 points playoff wise. The only thing that hurts this team is the minus 10 playoff points. The $400,000 fine, I don't think that Mr. Hendrick is very happy in paying it. I don't think that he's like, oh, I have to give NASCAR $400,000. I'm excited about this. I'm glad I have to give them more of my money. I don't think that he's too happy about that. I don't think that the drivers are ecstatic that they lost 100 regular season points, each of them. I don't think they're ecstatic about that. Also, though, the number one thing that I think that really hurts them and really pisses them off is the 10 playoff points. Because Justin Haley, like I said earlier, nobody over the last how many races was really looking at that 31 car going, he's a real championship, contender. He's a real championship threat. Not even somebody to threaten to make the playoffs. Nobody looked at that 31 car and said he's a playoff car. Nobody did. After watching him the last how many weeks, everyone was like, yeesh. He'll be lucky if he gets a couple of top 10s this season for how he's running. But the Hendrick group, let's be honest, all four of those Hendrick cars are championship contenders. Yes, I'm including Alex Bowman. Yes, I'm including William Byron. All four of those cars are championship contenders. So in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to the playoffs and the final 10 races of the season, those 100 regular season points that they got docked mean nothing. Because sure, they can be outside the top 20 in regular season points, which they probably will. Maybe they'll make it into the top 15 just based off of pure regular season points. based off of how well they run for the rest of the season. But it means absolutely nothing because all those points get thrown away and get reset once they get to the playoffs. And William Byron has already won 2 races. He's locked into the playoffs. Kyle Larson, he's going to be locked into the playoffs. He'll be just fine. Alex Bowman, I guarantee you, he'll probably win a race. He'll be fine. When Chase Elliott comes back, although he wasn't docked 100 points and 10 playoff points, but he's missed the last how many weeks? Everyone's, and no one's concerned that he's going to miss the playoffs. He'll win races. So, the question is, what was all this for? Why are we making such a big deal out of this? Because in the other sense of when Brad Keselowski and Justin Haley, they get penalized, it seems like a big deal. But when you are a playoff team, the only thing that matters in that entire penalty sheet that they got handed, again, $400,000 is no chump, it's not chump change. It's a large sum of money. But I think Hendrick Motorsports will be fine. I don't think that them having to dealt out $400,000 is going to kill the team and, going to set them back speed-wise or anything like that. They'll be just as fast as they ever will be. I don't think that the 100 regular season points is going to kill their season because all 4 of those cars are making the playoffs. There are 16 drivers in the playoffs. All 4 of those guys are getting in the playoffs. Have you seen how fast these Hendrick cars have been? Sure, it's been William Byron getting the 2 wins each time, but Kyle Larson was second for 99% of those times. As a matter of fact, he was leading for a good amount of one of those races as well. So don't tell me that all this kills Kyle Larson's season. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that don't like Alex Bowman and think that he's overrated and why is he still in the 48 and he's the 4th guy there and why does he still have a job, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of people out there who think that. The hate that Alex Bowman gets is beyond me. Because like I pointed out just a little bit ago, that dude was number 1 in points heading into or coming out of Phoenix before that penalty was dealt out. He was number 1. Not William Byron with those 2 wins. Not Kyle Larson with all those, the amount of time he's been up front and all the good runs he's had. Not Kevin Harvick. Not Danny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch. No one else. Alex Bowman was the number 1 guy in overall points. Now I understand that, like I just mentioned, the overall points in the grand scheme of things and what determines the champion, it means jack squat. I'm sorry, but NASCAR has created a points system where the regular season points that they gather just from finishing races and stuff, if you are an actual championship contender, it means nothing. If you're the Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, all the Martin Truex, if you're one of these guys who is going to have an actual legitimate shot at winning the championship, the regular points now mean nothing. The regular season points, they mean nothing. The only points that you'll gather that mean anything during the regular season are the playoff points, the stage wins, and the playoff points that you get for winning races. That's all that matters because that's the only things that actually carry over into the championship and the playoffs. Now, the only other thing I would say is, okay, well, what about the guy who has, finishes top in points, he gets 15 playoff points. Good. But does the guy who finishes second get anything? No, he doesn't. He doesn't even get one. He doesn't even get 1 playoff point for finishing second in overall points. So sure, for the guy who gets the most overall points during the regular season, he gets the 15 playoff points. Sure, he's the regular season champion and good for him. At the end of the day, it means something for him, but second on back, it means nothing. So again, those 100 regular season points, it's cute that you want to give those guys and penalize those guys that. Because like I said, HMS, I will bet $100 that all 4 HMS cars make the playoffs, no problem. One of them's already in, and we're only a couple races into the season. And don't look at me and say that I'm crazy because, like I said, Byron's already locked in because he has multiple wins. Kyle Larson has been really fast. He's going to win races this season. Chase Elliott, when he comes back, is going to be racing his ass off, and he's going to be racing with a vengeance. He's going to get wins. And Alex Bowman, who everybody dogs on, was one of the fastest cars. And what is his thing that he's well known for? He's well known for backing into wins. I don't doubt that this season he will win a race. For how terrible Alex Bowman was last year, he still had a pretty decent season, all things considered. This year, he has well improved. He will win races. It's not even a question as far as I'm concerned. So, HMS will be fine. This penalty is... I mean, look at how well HMS has ran to start this season. I mean, the speed that they have had, go listen to anybody else talking about NASCAR right now. They'll say the same thing I am. Go watch the races. HMS has been the team. Besides this past weekend, it's been HMS and everybody else. Like the speed that Hendrick Motorsports has compared to everybody else before Atlanta was just beyond what anybody could even think to achieve at that time. So they'll be fine. Trust me, it's not going to, like, their speed isn't going to stop here. It's not going to stop here. They're going to be fine. Like I said, they don't like the penalty. They don't like the fact that they have to dealt out $400,000. That's a lot of fucking money. I get it, but they'll be fine. They'll win races. They'll make the playoffs. In the grand scheme of things, it's a slap on the wrist. The other penalty that was dealt out was to Denny Hamlin. Now, I have, in my years and years ago, before I started trying to look at NASCAR more with a fair opinion, just an unbiased opinion, I was looking at it through a fan's perspective, and I did not like. I was one of those Denny Hamlin people, those Denny Hamlin people who just did not like Denny Hamlin. No matter what he did, I did not like him. Found him to be a douchebag on track, a douchebag off the track. Just did not like him. As I have became more and more unbiased, and I still have my moments where I kind of play favorites a little bit, but I try my absolute best to not play favorites when I'm watching the races. And I try to look at everything as unbiased as I possibly can. Because truthfully, my favorite driver as a kid growing up retired years and years ago, back in 2015. So there's no real reason for me to have a favorite driver. My favorite driver is gone. Like, he retired years and years ago. I'm more looking at the sport now as just a fan of the sport itself. So when Denny Hamlin got dealt out his 25-point penalty, and I don't remember what the fine was, maybe it was $10,000, maybe he didn't even get a fine. The main thing I saw was the 25 points that he got docked. And again, in the grand scheme of things, those 25 regular season points mean nothing. Especially to a guy like Denny Hamlin, who is going to win a race this year. He's going to make the playoffs. He'll win multiple races. He'll have dozens and dozens of playoff points probably. He'll be fine. Those 25 regular season points, like I said, in the grand scheme of things, sure, it might stop him from getting the 15, playoff points that he'll get if he were to win the overall, points the regular season championship at the end of the regular season. Sure, it'll maybe stop him from getting that. But like I said, from him winning the championship, it doesn't really stop him. It's a slap on the wrist. But the one thing that I did not like is the reason he got penalized. If you go look at the description as to what he got penalized for, the main thing that I saw was the actions detrimental. Funny pun there, because Denny Hamlin's podcast is called Actions Detrimental. But that part of the penalty that he got, the part of the penalty in the description as to why he got penalized was the actions detrimental to the sport of NASCAR part, which, truthfully, in my opinion, really ticked me off. And like I said, I'm not a Denny Hamlin fan. For years, I've never liked him. I always thought he came off as a douchebag, blah, 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 blah. So I'm saying this as somebody who years and years ago, and for many years, never liked the guy. But I cannot sit here and lie and say that NASCAR made the right choice. This was the wrong choice, period. I never thought I'd be sitting here saying this, but I listen to plenty of podcasts as well. Most of them are NASCAR. All those the Dirty Mo Media podcasts, I listen to all those. Not all of them. I listen to most of them. There's a couple that just have none of my interest. But the one thing I will say, Danny Hamlin's podcast is one of the most entertaining NASCAR podcasts that I have listened to. And mostly it's because, I will give him credit, he is honest. And he says how he actually feels. He doesn't toe the line. He doesn't sit there and go, well, NASCAR might be right because of this or that. He does not care. He will say exactly how he feels, whether it's good, bad, or in between. Whether you agree or disagree or whatever, he does not shy away from his actual opinion of things. There's maybe some things where he kind of hesitates on, and mostly it has to do with his own team and his own drivers. I'm not sitting here saying that he blows a bunch of smoke up his own driver's ass and, only says good things about his own team or anything like that. I'm not sitting here saying that he only does good things and that's the only thing that he constantly praises without judgment. What I'm saying is that he kind of toes the line a little bit more with that. But everything else besides talking about 2311 and Bubba Wallace and his own team and Tyler Reddick, everything else besides that, he seems 100% honest and upfront about. And I give him great praise and a lot of credit for having the balls to come out and be honest and say, look, I wrecked the guy on purpose. I wrecked Ross Chastain on purpose and I know that he said it had nothing to do with what happened last year, but I call bullshit on that. For how many times that Ross Chastain did get into Denny Hamlin and cost him a lot of points and a lot of spots and a lot of great finishes, and for him to pretty much sound like he only claimed the thing that happened at Pocono last year was his revenge, and then that's it. I highly doubt that what he did at Phoenix only had to do with the Clash. I'm not saying it had nothing to do with the Clash, but let's be honest here. Last season, Danny Hamlin got cost a lot of regular season points and a lot of great finishes and maybe some chances to win races because of Ross Chastain. And the Clash is a non-points paying race that it wasn't like Ross was the only guy who got into Denny. Denny got into plenty of other guys, and plenty of other guys got into, and Denny got into plenty of other guys, and plenty of other guys got into Denny Hamlin as well. Like, the Clash was a mess. So it's not, you can't sit here and say that it's just the Clash. I feel like that was a little bit of a white lie. I think that part of it was maybe the Clash, part of it, but I think a majority of it was a lot of what happened last season. And sure, people will say, well, he got his quote-unquote revenge at Pocono, but you can't sit there and tell me if you were a driver and you had one guy spin you out get into you and spin you out 5-6 times, and then you only retaliate against him one time, and then you go, now we're even. No, you're going to get it. You're going to go after him more. You're going to do the one thing at Pocono, and then maybe down the line you'll do something else, and you'll do something else, and until you finally get the message, until you finally are like, now I'm satisfied. Because I don't think that any person would sit there and go, I'm satisfied with him hitting me 5 or 6 times and me only hitting him once. Now we're even. Nope. Me personally, I'd be like, I'm going to hit him 6 or 7 times to prove my point. But that's just me. So I think that partially him getting into Ross Chastain at Phoenix partially was because of last season. I'm not saying it wasn't just it wasn't just last season or it wasn't just the Clash. I think it's a mixture of both. The number one thing that I do not like is the fact that NASCAR penalized him for it. And not because of what he did on track, it's because he admitted to it. Now, the one thing that I also didn't like, and again, I cannot believe I'm going to bat for Denny Hamlin. This just feels so weird. The other thing I did not like was the other drivers throughout the week after the penalty was dealt, before the race this past weekend in Atlanta, saying, well, he should have kept his mouth shut. Shouldn't be going around talking so much and doing the podcast. Like Daniel Suarez had a comment like that of he shouldn't have said that he wrecked him. Kyle Busch said something like that where he should have kept his mouth shut. Something along like you had multiple guys in the media pretty much saying that Denny Hamlin was in the wrong. Now, if I'm Denny Hamlin, I don't like that. And I'm going to those guys going, really? Like, so if you go out and you say something that could be possibly used against you in a penalty-wise, I'm supposed to sit here and go, you deserve the penalty. And I get that Denny Hamlin did put himself out there. And I know that people, the apologists for NASCAR in this scenario, will go, oh, well, he went and admitted to it on a podcast and he kind of put NASCAR in a box to where they had to do something. No, they didn't. Because if you listen to the podcast, Denny Hamlin said that they made up. Denny Hamlin went, and at the end of the story of him talking about him getting into Ross Chastain, he goes on to say that after the race, me and Ross had a long conversation. It ended cordially, and we buried the hatchet. He wanted a truce. I wanted a truce. So we called the truce, and from this point on, we will race each other as normal. We'll race each other hard, but we'll race each other from a clean slate from this point on. The problem is already done. Now, am I sitting here saying that it was a guarantee that at Atlanta we were never going to see anything happen between Ross and Denny? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to sit there and you're going to tell, because this isn't something of like, it's a part of, yes, Denny admitted to something that he did, and in a way it put NASCAR in a box, but if you sat down and had a conversation with both Ross and Denny before you dealt out this penalty, if Ross says something different, or Ross goes and says, that's not entirely true. We didn't really bury the hatchet. We didn't really call for a truce. He still kind of made it seem like there might be something more coming. Then I could see penalizing him. Not because he lied, but more just because that there might still be something there. So you penalize somebody in a meaningless points to try and send a message of, stop it. Cut it out. It's done. But on the other side of things is now you're setting a precedent that if Denny Hamlin goes on and continuously keeps being honest, like I said, I give Denny Hamlin full credit for being honest on his podcast. But if you go on now and you penalize Denny in the way that you did, and you uphold the penalty now after Denny is appealing it, if you uphold that penalty, it sets a message to all NASCAR drivers that that maybe we won't hear much from people in interviews, people in talk shows, people on podcasts, people in just, off-track interviews with the press or anything like that. They'll be a little bit more silent. They won't gush out as much as they probably could. Because trust me when I tell you, like I said, that Denny Hamlin podcast has been the most fun thing to listen to for the last how many weeks? As far as NASCAR podcasts go, it has been one of the more entertaining podcasts, period. I give Denny Hamlin full credit that him being honest and him sharing his true feelings, not just on what happened with Ross, but in that same podcast that he talked about last week. He talked about the short track package. He talked about his feelings across the manufacturers. And he gives a lot of insight into a lot of different things. So it's not just his controversial opinions, but he gives a lot of insight into even casuals, well, not even just casuals, I'm saying even more hardcore fans could learn something. Hardcore NASCAR fans could learn something from him. A little bit more insight, because Danny he basically called it. He's like, the Fords are the most behind. And we saw it at Fontana. We really saw it at Vegas. We saw it at Phoenix. We've seen it at a lot of these other tracks where Ford is just behind, but then we go to the super speedways. Now all of a sudden the Fords are fast. Now all of a sudden the Fords are the dominant car. So he gives a lot of insight that I think a lot of people should know and understand, that it's something that is great to hear and is, in my opinion, something that should never be pushed down, try to be silenced, or minimized in content in any way, shape, or form. Now, I don't think that Danny is going to let this penalty affect how he talks and what he shares on his podcast. At least I would hope. But I don't want to be this guy who like stands up on my soapbox and go, they're trying to, silence free speech within the drivers. I'm not going to be that guy, because I don't think that that's NASCAR's intent. I don't think that that's NASCAR's intent in the penalty. But in a way, it does send a message to guys like Denny Hamlin, or maybe anybody else who sees what Denny Hamlin is doing, who has thought about doing a podcast, thought about doing that same type of platform, thought about sharing in that way, and it kind of makes the drivers hesitant in what they're willing to share. And at the end of the day, when they're in interviews now, they're a little bit more, they're not as outgoing. They're a little bit more introverted with what they're willing to share. So now, in front of a camera, when you have a driver in front of a camera, they're not as open. They're not as willing to show their personality. They're not willing to say as much as they probably were previously. And now the drivers become even more boring than they already were. Drivers now in NASCAR in front of a camera are already as boring as you can get. You don't need to make them more boring, more insecure, more, holding in their personality even more than they already are. Like, we already have that enough as it is. Every single driver who gets in front of a camera has a microphone put in their face. They're already about as monotone as you can get. There's little to no personality throughout that garage area right now. So what you're sending a message, whether it's intended or not, is pretty much stay quiet. Don't say anything. And that's why I'm not a big fan of these other drivers like Daniel Suarez and Kyle Busch coming out pretty much saying, shouldn't have opened your mouth. Shouldn't have said anything. That's not what the message should be. The message should be those guys coming out going, listen, man, Denny Hamlin has a great personality, and he's willing to share a lot, and he's willing to be honest, and anybody who's being honest shouldn't be punished for being honest. I'm not saying that they should be rewarded, but they shouldn't be punished for sharing their honest opinion and saying how they feel. Because that's, at the end of the day, I would like guys who go out in interviews and do podcasts and TV shows and whatever, I would like them to be honest. I don't want everybody to just toe the company line and always say the corporate thing that NASCAR would love. I would love some guys to go against the grain, and that's why I'm finding myself have more respect for Denny Hamlin now as a person. Still some things that he does as a driver that's questionable, but as a person, I'm respecting him much more. And that's why I'm saying, if he continues to be just as honest as he was before this penalty, then I'll respect him even more. Because you need more people that are willing to say things that, are controversial. Willing to say things that go against the grain of NASCAR. And in this case, willing to be honest. Because you see too many times where it's like, oh, he probably wrecked that guy. And then every time it's, oh, no, I didn't mean to wreck him. Totally, oh, something must have broke on the car. How many times have you seen guys get spun out and then drivers pissed off saying, oh, he purposely wrecked me. And then the guy after the race, oh, no, totally on accident. What's more entertaining? Guys sitting there in an interview going, oh, totally on accident. Or not even just flat out saying, yeah, I fucking turned him. But I'm not saying it always has to be what Danny Hamlin did, where he just comes out and says, yeah, I just flat out turned to the right and put him in the wall. But maybe just a hint of like, yeah, I mean, me and him have had problems for a while now, and maybe he'll tone it down or something. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be a flat-out admission of purposely wrecking somebody all the time. Sometimes you can be a little bit subtle with it, but I don't know if these drivers even know subtlety anymore. As far as news, though, like I said, not in agreement with the penalty that they gave Danny Hamlin. Hopefully they listen to Danny Hamlin's reasoning and reverse that penalty, take the, clear that penalty and just kind of forget about it, because I have a feeling that NASCAR probably will uphold the penalty and they will not reverse their decision, knowing how NASCAR is in these types of scenarios, and they're probably going to be stubborn and not give in, but we'll see what happens. As far as news, though, not too much news outside of that, so let's go ahead and let's dive into the races from this past weekend. So, this past weekend, we saw 3 races at Atlanta Motor Speedway. The new, no, it's not new anymore, but the newer Super Speedway race, a mile and a half at Atlanta, saw the Truck, Cup, and Xfinity races. An interesting weekend, to say the least. You know, I've said for the last how many weeks, if you've been listening to the last how many weeks of this podcast, I've been saying the Xfinity racers are going to probably dominate the season as far as, best races of the weekend. I've been saying that for the last how many weeks now, because let's be honest, the Xfinity races have been the best races we've seen. The Xfinity race was the best race Daytona weekend. It was the best race it wasn't, not by a mile, but I'd still say the Xfinity race was pretty close to as good as I'll give the Cup race, the Fontana one. Cup race we'll just say the Cup race was the best race at Fontana, but Xfinity was very close. The race at Vegas, Xfinity was better by a mile. It wasn't even close. The Phoenix race, Xfinity Series race, was much better as well. So Xfinity, and like I said, Xfinity will probably, as far as quality of racing and competitiveness and the type of racing that we see, Xfinity Series racing will probably be the best racing that we'll see all year long. Overall. This weekend, I'd be hard-pressed. I have to be honest. The Xfinity race this weekend was probably the worst race out of all 3. I'll get to the Xfinity race in a second, but let's start with the Truck Series race. The Truck Series race was as you expect. The Truck Series race is kind of, anytime that you go to a Truck Series race, especially at Super Speedway races, you're going to see a lot of wrecks. It wasn't as bad as the Xfinity race, but that first stage, you saw a couple of guys get into it. Daniel Dye, as far as just points off the top of my head, Daniel Dye was having problems. Seemed like, I don't know if they had engine issues, but they were very slow right off the gate. Matt goddamn Crafton. I don't know if they had said that he had never won a stage, but I think that it was like his first stage win since 2020, they were saying. I want to say that that's what they said. But Matt Crafton won that first stage. You kind of got to see, obviously, the ThorSport teams work pretty well together. They kind of all lined up nose to tail. I think it was Crafton, Majeski, and Ben Rhodes was the third car in line. Matt DiBenedetto was kind of fiddling with the lead. That's the thing is, I love Matty D. I loved him when he was in the 21. I still love him now. He's the one guy that I'll sit here and say that I'm like a fan of, and I'll still cheer for. And it's easy because like he's a Truck Series guy, so it's not like I'm being biased on a Cup level. It's Truck Series level. Okay, it's the third series. I can be a fan of one guy. But Matty D, he was that Rackley truck is okay. I don't know, because when I said that Matty D went, I didn't say that, I didn't have the podcast at the time, but I was thinking this. when Matty D went from that 21 car back to the Truck Series, I thought it's a great move. We saw John Hunter do the same thing. John Hunter was in the Cup Series. I've said this on the podcast before. He was in the Cup Series in that 36 car for Front Row. Got put back to the Truck Series, trying to win some races, completely changed the trajectory of his career wholeheartedly. Changed him from what probably most people would consider a bust to kind of saying maybe he's still got something for a top-end team. Won a lot of races for KBM. Then now obviously running the Xfinity Series for Joe Gibbs. But Matt, I don't know if it's... I don't want to say it's his political viewing in the way that he is, but I don't think it's more that. I think it's more of just the fact that for some reason Matty D just can't find sponsorship, as probably most drivers can't find sponsorship, have a tough time finding sponsorship to actually commit to them. And so he gets stuck with the Rackley truck. I'm not sitting here saying it's an abysmal truck, but it's not obviously a Thor Sport. It's not, a KBM. It's not a top-end team. But it's okay for what he is, and he can make a living off of this, obviously. But Matt DiBenedetto, he won at Talladega last year. He was kind of fiddling with the lead here. I still think that Matt DiBenedetto, I'll call it now, I think he's a playoff truck this year. He seems like he has it a little bit more down this year. It seems like it seems like the truck's a bit faster. Again, this is a very small sample size. 2 of them have been super speedway racing, and Matt DiBenedetto is very good on super speedway racing. But I really think that Matt DiBenedetto is a playoff truck this year. That's my one kind of dark horse wild card. And I know it's like, oh, it's Matt DiBenedetto. That's not really more of a dark horse, but like considering what they kind of were last year, it wasn't like they were totally knocking on the door of the playoffs and they just missed it by a couple points. Like they were pretty, not saying they are outside the top 20, but like they were farther down the list than what you'd expect. Go back and look at the playoff points heading into the last couple races of the Truck Series season last year. It wasn't like he needed a win to get into the playoffs. He wasn't a guy who could have even points his way in for the last how many races. As far as the Truck Series race, though, overall, there were a couple of points where it kind of got slow with some of the cautions that came out. Besides that, the racing that we really saw, I didn't think was really that bad. I saw some people on Twitter, which I got to be honest, I am considering just ditching Twitter altogether. I mean, just reading what people have said about the races this past weekend and the opinions of some people on Twitter is just, it makes me sit there and actually contemplate whether or not the fandom that I'm surrounded by in the sport of NASCAR is just off their rocker. Like, there's a large part of me, and maybe I'm right about this because it's Twitter, and most people who are probably NASCAR fans on Twitter are kids, like young teenagers who have watched the sport for probably 4 years now and think that, Joey Logano is the greatest driver ever because they've only been watching for the last 4 years. I got to be honest, like, the people who talked like, oh, the Truck Series race is so terrible. Oh, my God, it's so bad. There's so many wrecks. It's like, do you watch the truck races? I've watched every truck race this past season. I've watched how many truck races for the last how many years? I remember the days of Ron Hornaday and Todd Bodine and Timothy Peters and Johnny Sauter, and when Matt Crafton was, still very good and was a top guy in the Truck Series. Like, I remember those days. I remember the days of when Austin Dillon was still in the Truck Series and Chase Elliott was still in the Truck Series, and I remember when Joe Nemechek had his own team, and then he had John Hunter and the 8 truck. I bet nobody fucking remembers the time where John Hunter was driving the 8 truck in the Truck Series. Especially these people on Twitter, they just started watching NASCAR 4 years ago and they think they're geniuses. Like, the people who sit there and complain because you're at a super speedway race and you see some cautions. Like, it is a product of the racing. Now, I will say there is a fine line between decent amount of wrecks at a super speedway race and ridiculousness to where it starts to get embarrassing. And that comes in the next race is when it starts to get embarrassing. But all things considered, the truck race was actually pretty good. There was, and again, when you're getting towards the end of these races, you're going to see more wrecks. You're going to see guys get aggressive. It's just the nature of the game. Guys get more aggressive as you get closer to the end. They're going to make moves that aren't going to work and aren't going to stick, and it's going to end up in a giant wreck. It's going to happen. But again, all things considered, that truck race was decent. Trust me, I've seen truck races that are bad. Go back, I don't want to say it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. Go back and watch some of those Knoxville races that the Truck Series ran. Go look at the parking lot that the big pileup that happened at Knoxville a couple years ago was. There have been some bad truck races. I'm not sitting here saying that everybody in the truck race is, the cleanest drivers on the planet. But all things considered, let's put it on the Truck Series scale. Let's not look at the Truck Series drivers and, expect cup level talent. There's a reason why the Truck Series is the third tier series. Like, a lot of rookies. Fucking A. I want to say his name is Jake Garcia, driving that 35 truck. The dude's 18, and he just turned 18 not too long ago. It's not like it's not a field of Matt Craftons who are in their 30s and 40s. Like, especially now. Years and years ago, you probably see more guys in their 30s and 40s and more veterans in the Truck Series. But all those guys have been phased out. Like I said, Ron Hornaday's gone, Johnny Sauter's gone, Timothy Peters is gone, Tom Bodine is gone. Really the only main veteran left in the Truck Series is Matt Crafton. Like, he's the last guy. Everybody else is all gone and retired. So most of the Truck Series now is pretty damn close to the ARCA Series. Like, the ARCA Series is a bunch of kids, like legitimate kids. The fucking guy who was in the ARCA Series who won at Phoenix last week, I want to say he was like 15 years old. So a lot of these guys are kids. So you can't go into these races in the lower series, the ARCA and the Truck Series, and expect them to be able to race side by side with each other, even at a super speedway. Even at a super speedway, be able to bump draft and race side by side and side draft each other super clean for 100 laps straight. Like, you can't expect what we saw at the end of the Cup race to happen at the end of the truck race. You just can't expect that. It's just a part of the game. It's a part of what makes the Truck Series great. It's part of what makes the ARCA Series great is you get to see kids in there, and you're going to see some mistakes, and you're going to see some wrecks, and you're going to sit there in your chair and play Monday morning quarterback and go, how the fuck, why the fuck would he make that move? That doesn't even make any sense. How did he even think that would work? But they're kids, they're learning, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to cause wrecks. It's a part of what makes these lower series honestly great. So you can't sit there and complain about the decent amount of wrecks that you saw at the Truck Series race. And honestly, Atlanta, it's a super speedway race in a mile and a half. The racing is still pretty freaking close quarters. Guys are going to get into each other. Guys are going to wreck. It's going to happen. Not a lot of those guys in the Truck Series have a lot of patience because, like I said, they're kids. Not all of them are Matt Craftons. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to make mistakes. So the truck race was fine. Congratulations to... I'm blanking on who fucking won the race. Holy shit. I cannot believe I just blanked on who won the race. I got to go back into my memory bank. This is going to kill me. Oh my god, I cannot believe I forgot who won this race. Hang on a second. Christian Eckes. I cannot believe I forgot. See, this is the pros and cons. See, as before in the first couple episodes of this podcast, I was taking extensive notes, so I just read off the notes. But now I'm going based off of pure memory, and I watched the Truck Series race like how many days ago? Back on Saturday. So, and it's Monday of when I'm recording this, so it's a couple of days. So it takes me a little bit to remember. But I didn't actually have to Google it. Trust me, I did not go to Google and search up who won the race. I went and I clicked on a tab, and then right as I clicked on the tab, I go, oh, fuck, Christian Eckes won the race. So congratulations to Christian Eckes. He was, again, one of those guys who was up front for a good amount of it, led some laps, had some speed, and then he made all the right moves there at the end. The one thing I will say, though, it seems like, and it kind of seems to translate the same way in iRacing, but as far as the super speedway packages across all three of those series, it seems like the truck is the best. As a viewer, it seems like the truck super speedway package is the best and most fun to watch. So, again, congratulations to Christian Eckes. Good for him. I think Napa is based out of Atlanta, so that was a pretty big win for obviously Napa and that 19 team. A big step up. The other thing I want to say, I don't know who owns that 19 car, but going from Derek Kraus to Christian Eckes is a pretty big step up. I don't know if Christian Eckes got a pay raise from going from Thor Sport to that 19 truck, but if he did, good for him. I also think that it was a pretty good move overall for both parties because they got to open a seat up for somebody in Thor Sport. And honestly, I think that keeping Matt Crafton there and keeping that sponsor there, I'm talking Thor Sport, is still a valuable asset. I know and understand that most people will be like, got to go with the young guy. Matt Crafton's old and done, but at this point, like, Truck Series overall, sponsor-wise, has been struggling for years. Like, it is almost impossible to find a Truck Series team to go out and find sponsorship is, like, impossible. The only reason that you'd bring in a driver is, at this point, if they bring in a sponsor with them. So to find guys who are actually able to keep sponsors, especially like Crafton, who's been able to, like, I think they talked about it, it's like Menards has been sponsoring Matt Crafton for like the last 20 years, which is just insane. Like to have a sponsor, even like Menards, who is obviously as committed as they are to NASCAR, to keep that sponsor around for 20 years is insane. So I understand the move for Christian Eckes. It kind of felt like Eckes being on that Thor Sport team. It was almost like he was a third wheel on that team. And for him to get a different opportunity now with that 19 car, and now obviously they're in the playoffs, and because he won in Atlanta, good for him. I don't want to sit here and say that Christian Eckes is going to be a guy to look to move to the next series next year, but he's at least a new name who I would contend, I'm not saying he's going to win the championship, but he'll be somewhat a contender. I think he'll definitely be in the final 6. Now, for people who don't know, I think it's the Truck Series playoffs. I want to say it's the top 10. They eliminate 2, and then they eliminate 4. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how the Truck Series playoff goes. I think they take the top 10 trucks, they eliminate the bottom 2 in the first round, and then they eliminate the next 4 in the next round, and then the final 4 is at Phoenix, obviously. So I think that Christian Eckes will make it to the second round, is what I'm saying. I'm a little bit questionable on whether or not he can make it to the final 4, but he's a guy who I'll see in the second round, I think. Anyways, congratulations to Christian Eckes. Let's talk about the shit show. Shit show of the weekend was the Xfinity Series race. The only thing, I'll get the good news out of the way. The ending of the race was very, very good. The ending was very, very good. Congratulations to Austin Hill. I don't think anybody at this point will ever, if anybody is still questioning whether or not Austin Hill can drive, go back and watch the ending of that Atlanta race. I know I saw some people, again on Twitter, dogging on Daniel Hemrick because he turned Parker Kligerman into Austin Hill, and it almost caused a giant pileup and blah, blah, blah. I'm not even focusing on that. I am not even focusing on Daniel Hemrick. I'm not even focusing on Parker Kligerman. I'm focusing on the fact that how the hell did Austin Hill keep that car straight? You have to understand. Go back and watch the clip. They're coming off of 4. The banking change is so abrupt at right that time when Parker Kligerman gets turned into Austin Hill that it's already hard enough as it is if somebody's just on your right rear quarter panel, or if somebody's on your outside. The banking change there does affect your car. You can get loose. We saw it in the Cup Series. The Cup Series race that happened the next day, you saw guys getting loose coming off of turn 4. That banking change, that transition from turn 4 onto the front stretch can be difficult. Now, with that being said, you have Daniel Hemrick, because you saw he got tight coming. I don't think, for anybody who's claiming that Daniel Hemrick intentionally turned Parker Kligerman, I don't think that's the case. I really don't. What I think happened was Daniel Hemrick got tight coming off of 4. He came up the track. Parker Kligerman was there, got into his left rear quarter panel, obviously, and then that turned Parker Kligerman down. What shocked me was that Parker Kligerman turned down, got into Austin Hill, and Austin Hill should have, amongst what I think probably most people watching a lot of NASCAR races would say, Austin Hill should have been facing head-on into the wall and been destroyed and maybe not even made it to the line. Because the way he got hit should have had him turned hard right and destroying his front end and giving Daniel Hemrick the win. That's what, based off of what we see all the time in that type of scenario, that's what should have happened. But the fact that Austin Hill was able to hold on to that car, now I don't know if it was a spotter telling him, split-second decision, saying they're getting turned on the outside, but then again, like, he doesn't have enough time to even say that. So Austin Hill just has to react on instinct to keep that car going straight. And obviously he turned hard left to keep that car from going right. And somehow, some way, he kept that thing going straight and made it across the line straight in one piece. He wasn't even spinning across the line like Parker Kligerman was. He kept it straight, and he ended up winning that race. And to anybody who would say right now that Austin Hill, and I get it, it's super speedway racing, it's not most races, and you can't determine how somebody's season is going to go based off of how they do it at super speedway. I understand that. But that moment there at the end of the race, and the skill, and I'm not sitting here saying that, like I said, it's a guarantee that Austin Hill is going to win this championship, but to me, he is a guaranteed Final Four guy. I don't care how good of a season Justin Allgaier has, John Hunter, Daniel Hemrick, Josh Berry, any of the other litany of drivers that are in the Xfinity Series. I don't care how good of a season anybody else has. That guy, Austin Hill, he has a lot of talent. And RCR, or whoever picks him up to go in the Cup Series, has somebody there. I don't want to sit here and blow a bunch of smoke and say, he's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but he is legit. I remember saying on this podcast in one of my first couple episodes, like, where's the talent in the Xfinity Series? Like, I remember saying at the beginning of the season, I'm like, it is wide open. There is all the talent that dominated the season last season left for the Cup Series. A.J. Allmendinger, Ty Gibbs, and Noah Gragson, they all went to the Cup Series. 3 guys who were the top 3 guys in the Xfinity Series last year all left. So who's going to step up to the plate? I'm telling you right now, this Austin Hill cat, he is fucking good. The fact that he was able to run down Chandler Smith at the end of the Las Vegas race, the run that he had at this race at Atlanta, and then the win that he had at Daytona, dude is on fire. And like I said, it's not just super speedway racing. Sure, he had 2 great runs at super speedway super speedway races, but he is legit. He had a great run at Vegas, and I really believe, like, this is the guy. Like, out of all the guys right now, he is the guy. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that, guys like John Hunter or Justin Allgaier or Chandler Smith or I don't even want to talk about Cole Custer right now. He's totally another story. I don't want to say those guys they got no shot. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is like, if there's anybody who I would say who's had momentum to start this season, if you're going to ask me, like, who are the top guys to start the season right now? Has had by far the most momentum? I'd say it's William Byron, Austin Hill, I would even venture to say kind of Brad, although Brad's not winning races, he's led every single race. I'd say Kyle Larson. I'd say even a guy like Alex Bowman. Like, Alex Bowman's not winning races, but he was topping points for a reason. I'd even say Kevin Harvick. I'm trying to give more Xfinity guys a chance. Chandler Smith has had a pretty good start to the season. He's shocked a lot of people and how well he's ran. Now, obviously, he had problems in Atlanta, but take out Atlanta, like, he's been pretty good. I think I mentioned John Hunter, but like Justin Allgaier, even with the problems he's had, he's shown speed. There's a lot of different guys who you could say have like had amazing starts of the season. But out of all those guys that I just mentioned, if you were to ask me, out of any of those guys, who's the one guy who I think can have the momentum at the beginning of the season and carry that to the end of the season and to the playoff and into the championship race, it's Austin Hill. He's the guy right now. Like, there is, like, William Byron's had speed. Kyle Larson's had speed relatively to his series. John Hunter had speed at Fontana. Chandler Smith had speed at Vegas. So did Justin Allgaier. Like, but Austin Hill, there's something about him. Like, there's something about that car. There's something about that speed. His maneuverability that he was able to show at both super speedway racing is untouchable. The one thing I will say that isn't even a doubt, the best super speedway racer in the Xfinity Series by far, by a mile, isn't even close, is Austin Hill. Sheldon Creed is just tailing along for the ride. Sheldon Creed is just following him. You saw it in Atlanta. Sheldon Creed just followed the 21 to the front. Oh, I'll just follow the best fucking super speedway racer in the entire series all the way to the front. So, it's Austin Hill. Austin Hill is the best super speedway racer, period, in the Xfinity Series, and it's not even close. That's why I feel so bad that Austin Hill missed the Daytona 500. Like, out of the guys who I would have wished made the Daytona 500, he was one of those guys. Because, sure, the 62 isn't the greatest car on the planet, but he was fast. Like, he was able to keep up with the main pack. Like, he was somebody to consider as like a dark horse, underdog, underfunded team to possibly win that Daytona 500. But obviously he never got that shot because he was involved in the wreck and the duels. But that's the only good thing that came out of this race, though, was finding out that Austin Hill is a star. Like, out of the Xfinity Series talent, so, you know, I know some people be like, well, Chandler Smith is a star, and John Hunter, he's won a race. He's going to be a star. It's Austin Hill right now. Out of everybody else, it's Austin Hill, and then it's the field. Like, the dude's won 3 races. He's had speed. I understand 2 of them are super speedway racing. But, like, it's not by luck. He earned those fuckers. He earned them. Here's the other thing that happened in the Xfinity Series race. Here's the bad news that came out of this race. I'll try to be as nice as I can. The first stage was an embarrassment. And yeah, that's me being nice. The fact that in the first 2 stages, Adam Alexander said in the first 2 stages, they had the longest green flag run that they had was 9 laps. That's embarrassing. That is embarrassing. And it'd be one thing if you sat there and went, it's just guys being aggressive. It's just guys being, you know, over the top, making dumb moves, blah, blah. Some of them were that. Some of them were pretty bad moves being made, way too aggressive moves being made for no reason. Others were just flat-out stupidity. Like, guys can't even make it down in the corner side by side. Like, it's ARCA-style bad. Like, it's worse than anything I've seen in ARCA all year. With some of that shit that happened at Atlanta with the Xfinity Series race. It was bad. And I understand that it is still a lower series, but, like, this is supposed to be the next level right below Cup. And you got guys out there making some of the dumbest moves. The one thing that, like, blew my mind away was the Chastain wreck. I don't remember what the kid's first name is. It's Ross Chastain's younger brother. I can't remember his first name for the life of me. He was in the 91 car. He had a lot of dumb stuff happen, but the other one that like solidified what some guys in the Xfinity series who get opportunities just don't deserve to get opportunities. And I'm usually not somebody to sit there and go, he should be fired. Like, I'm not sitting there saying that this guy should be fired, but the Garrett Smithley thing, go back and watch that. Go back and listen to Garrett Smithley scream over the radio over him being the one that makes a dumb move. And Joey Logano said it best on the broadcast. It's like, supposedly what happened was Jeffrey Earnhardt and I don't remember who the other one was. The other car. Kaz Grala. That's what it was. Jeffrey Earnhardt and Kaz Grala got involved in a wreck in turns 3 and 4. And the wreck happened on the bottom lane. So Garrett Smithley is, 10 car lengths back. Spotter calls him to go high because the wreck is happening low. And as Joey, so elegant, or I think it was Joey or Coleman Presley, one of those two so eloquently explained that the spotter can only do so much for you in that scenario. At the end of the day, the driver is in control. The driver is the person who is behind the wheel and controls where the car goes, whether it goes left or right. And spotter sees the wreck happening low. The spotter doesn't know for sure. He can take a 50-50 guess, and I think Coleman Presley said this. It's a 50-50 shot. If the wreck is happening low at a super speedway race, and as they said, like a track like Bristol, where the banking is so much, you can only take a guess on whether or not the wreck is going to stay low or it's going to go high. And in that scenario, if I'm a spotter and I see a wreck happening low and I don't know for sure if it's going to continue to go low down the track and onto the apron or if it's going to slide up the track, I'm going to tell the driver to go where the cars are not. That's just what I'm going to do. And I think that if you were to probably ask most spotters, that's probably what they would do. That's what most spotters would do as well. Now, also, let's point this out. Garrett Smithley was driving the 4 car, a very underfunded team. Usually, underfunded teams don't have the greatest sponsors. Or, not sponsors. Usually, underfunded teams don't have the greatest spotters. So, like, you're not seeing TJ Majors spot for the 4 car. Like, TJ Majors is spotting for a top-end team. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to see the better spotters spot for the better teams. So, I'm not sitting here saying that the guy who spotted for the 4 car is bad. What I'm saying is that he's probably not as experienced as a guy like TJ Majors. He's probably not as experienced as a guy like Coleman Presley. He's probably not as experienced as Eddie DeHaan and the top-end spotters that you know and love. He's probably not one of those guys who have years and years and years and years and years of experience. So, in that sense, you're going to call the guy to go where the cars are not. And at the time of the wreck, the cars are in the low lane. If I'm a spotter and I'm spotting for Garrett Smithley, I'm going to tell him to go high. Because the cars are on the low lane and I can't predict where the cars are going to go all the time. I can only venture a guess. I don't know what the future is. I don't know the exact trajectory of what the drivers behind the wheel are going to choose to do. I don't know. So I am going to give the driver my best guess in that scenario. So I call him to go high. Just so happens when he goes high, cars shoot back up the track. Like Coleman Presley said in the broadcast, it's a 50-50 shot. You can't know for sure. And then, of course, and I'm not going to call for Garrett Smithley's job, but for him to sit there and scream over the radio at his spotter, I understand that you're frustrated. I understand that it was like 13, 14 laps into the race, and your race is over because you're involved in a wreck this early. I get that, but like, to scream at your spotter like that, nobody, who wants to work with that guy? Also, by the way, I didn't see any sponsors on that 4 car, so it's not like Garrett Smithley's bringing any sponsors in. So, and trust me, this isn't the first time that I remember hearing Garrett Smithley screaming over the radio at somebody. And he's not really been known, as far as I know, to be the greatest driver on the planet. There's a reason why he's driving underfunded teams and not doing a great job at it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting here saying Ryan Vargas is the greatest driver on the planet or Brendan Poole is the greatest driver on the planet, but those guys have been known to drive for some of those underfunded teams, and I've seen them run plenty better than I've seen anything Garrett Smithley do. So, and trust me, he wasn't the only guy. That wreck on lap 2 with Joey Gase, just this. I understand it's a pay-to-play right now in NASCAR, especially in the lower end tier, the lower end series. A lot of these teams, it's pay-to-play, especially in the lower end teams in the lower end series. If you bring anything to the table, they'll put you in the car. And I also understand, I believe that they said that Cesar Baccarella actually has ownership stake in the team he was driving for. Again, like, it's not even like the car got loose. Like, he just couldn't even keep the car straight. I know that Joey tried to be like, oh, I think something broke on the car. Like, no, he just lost it. As far as I know, I never heard that he broke anything in the car. Maybe I'm wrong. But as far as what I saw, it looked like he just was going through the tri-oval, and then it's like, you lost the car in the tri-oval. It's like, come on, man. And that was like a preview of what the rest of the first and second stage were. They were embarrassing. Like I said, 9 laps was the longest green flag run we had between cautions. Are you kidding me? And this is the second best racing in NASCAR, period? What? This was bad. Like I said, the Xfinity Series racing up till this race was pretty damn good. Daytona was pretty good. Fontana was great. Las Vegas was really great. Phoenix was pretty good. There was some dumb stuff at Phoenix, but, you know, you're not always going to get the cleanest racing. And then there was this, and this was just like, I hate to be a guy. I don't agree with everything that Justin Allgaier said, but I agreed when he said that it was embarrassing. Like, he was embarrassed for the sport, because that was an embarrassing first 2 stages. Like, it was bad racing. And the fact that anybody sat there and enjoyed that, like the comment that Joey Logano made during the broadcast, where it's like, well, if you enjoy cautions and you enjoy wrecks, then this is the race for you, or something along those lines. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I understand that there are some people that it's like, well, you got to have some wrecks and you got to have some cautions in a race. But there is a line. I enjoy wrecks and I enjoy cautions. I do. But like I said, there is a line to that. There's a line where it gets to the point where it gets embarrassing, and it makes you look Bush League. Like, that is, I think, the perfect way to describe Atlanta's race for the Xfinity Series was it looked Bush League. Like, guys couldn't keep it. Looked like bottom split. Like, guys can't keep the car straight. They can't go 9 laps without a caution. It's like, guys, what are we doing here? You guys are supposed to be the next generation of Cup drivers, and you can't even keep the goddamn car straight? Like, are you kidding me? Is the Xfinity Series that low in talent right now where guys can't literally keep the car straight? Come on. So, like I said, the first 2 stages were tough to watch. You know, because like I was also saying, like, there's too many cautions, and there's that line of where it gets to too many cautions where it looks Bush League. But also, who enjoys watching pace laps? Who enjoys sitting there like, all right, we see a quick caution, somebody spins or somebody gets involved in a wreck. Well, now you're sitting there watching, you know, another 8 or 9 pace laps. It's like, who wants to sit there and watch cars pace? I want to see that cars actually race side by side. So, yeah, the Xfinity race was the worst race of the weekend, mostly because of what happened those first 2 stages. The third stage was better. It was better. And that's why I say, you know, congrats to Austin Hill. Good for him. He fucking earned that win by a mile. Like he is proven, like I said earlier, he's by far the best super speedway racer in the Xfinity Series, period. So let's talk about the final race of the weekend, the Cup Series race. I'll start with the bad news on this one. They got to fix that super speedway package. You know, that right now the big talk is, you know, coming off of Phoenix. What do we think of the short track package? We got to improve the short track package. The short tracks have been terrible with this new next gen car, and it's tough to watch. Blah blah blah. I hate to be that guy, but we went the other way in the Cup Series, where I like clean side by side super speedway racing, where you see guys get runs and you see guys make moves that sometimes are aggressive and sometimes screw over other guys, but they're able to keep it clean. That's what we saw at the end of the race. But the one thing, the other side of that coin of where you get too long of green flag runs and you get guys getting too settled in, is what we saw in the Cup Series for especially that second stage. The second stage went green the entire time. If you couldn't tell by their little fucking cool little mini bar, it went green the entire time, and everybody was lined up single file for most of it. That's the thing about super speedway racing that I cannot stand. I will never understand it, especially the guys who are 13th, 14th on back, who just are fine with sitting there in a line and don't even make a move. It's, again, the one thing I will respect about Denny Hamlin is at least when they are in single file, you'll have some guys who try to make moves and try and slice and dice their way towards the front, but it's tough, and it's really tough with this package when if you get out of line, as Denny Hamlin said on his podcast, you get out of line and you're out there alone, you are so much slower than everybody else that it is, you just get freight trained. In the first stage, Kyle Larson was trying to make moves, and again, they were in that line, and he's trying to side draft and be on that inside line and try his absolute best to get a run on some of those guys towards the front and trying to make up as many spots as he can and then trying to find a spot back in line. But the draft is so important in these cars, and being able to have help with other multiple cars to try and, you know, generate as much speed as you can. It's so important that nobody can sit out there, 2, 3, 4 cars on that inside line, especially on that inside line, because of how important the side draft is. You lose so much time on that inside line. So then, as you saw at Atlanta, guys get in that top lane and they run that giant freight train around the outside, and then there's no movement. Nobody at the front makes any moves. Nobody at the back even tries anything. You just get one giant freight train, and then people just sit in line because they know if they try to make any moves, and they try to make any moves on the inside or try and, dive bomb somebody and then slide it back in line, there's no spot that they could even attempt to try and slide back up in line. And even if they were to try and stay on the inside, they're going to lose time no matter what, because not only is nobody behind you going to go with you because they just see a spot that they can gain from watching you roll on by and go to the back, but even if a couple guys did try to get in line with you, there's nothing on that inside line that you can do unless you have half the field go with you. So the only time you see good side-by-side racing like we saw at the end of the race is at the end. So I hate to be one of these guys, but it's like it seemed like the first 2 stages, take it or leave it. The only time we really saw wrecks was the one wreck we saw was the Eric Almirola blowing a fucking tire, for Christ's sake. And then the other one was the Ross Chastain just packing too much air on Kevin Harvick. There was no other real wrecks that we saw. Obviously, Bubba Wallace lost it on his own, and that's just because he got loose. And that's just, I don't want to say it's a freak thing, but it's kind of like a freak thing that nobody else did it all race long. It just happened to happen to him, just randomly. But, like, besides that, you didn't really see any other wrecks. And again, I'm not begging for wrecks, but I'm begging for just, like, competitive racing. That's the point of super speedway racing. The point of super speedway racing is not just to keep cars close to each other. It is the ability to generate runs and to see guys make multiple passes. To see a guy go from 10th to 1st in 2 laps. To see a guy go from the back to the front in a very short amount of time. The aura of super speedway racing is that the fact you can be 20th place and you're not out of the race yet. But with this super speedway package, if you're 20th, you're out of the race. You got no shot in winning. If you get closer towards the end of the race here and you're in 20th, your best chance is getting like 15th. Or if there's a giant pileup in front of you, maybe 10th. But, like, you got no shot at winning. And a lot of it has to do with the package. The super speedway package, I don't want to sit here and be like, it's just the package, but maybe it's partially the car, maybe it's just the package. I don't know exactly what the solution is. My assumption is the package that we run there. But the main thing that just irritates me the most is the amount of dirty air that comes off this car. And because of the amount of dirty air, you can't get to somebody. There's nothing that you can do on the inside. And like I said earlier, the side draft that you can do on the outside, and I see it more specifically at Atlanta because Atlanta is only at 1.5 miles, and the other two are 2.5 miles. Because the other tracks are so big, the inside line can still kind of try to be the preferred line because it is still that much of a shorter distance. Whereas at Atlanta, comparative from the inside to the outside, it's not that much of a distance between the outside and the inside line. You're still pretty close just because of how narrow the corners are. So the side draft is so major, and it gives the outside line that gets a big run off the corner such an advantage. That's why when you saw at the end of the race, the main thing Joey Logano wanted to do, he got stuck in the inside. The main thing he wanted to do was to get to the outside, because the outside line was the preferred line all race long. If you were in the outside, you got the run. You had everybody pushing behind you. You had all the momentum, and you were able to side draft the guys on the inside. That's why when I saw Brad went down to the bottom and then Joey went up to the top at the end of the race, I'm like, the race is over. Joey just won it with that move. Because there's nothing that Brad can do now. He's stuck on the inside. He had way less help. Everybody was on the outside. You saw it at the end of the race. The giant push came from Christopher Bell and everybody else behind him from the outside line because the outside line was just generating so much more throughout the race. And it's nothing to do with these drivers. It has everything to do with this package. And maybe it's the package and the car, but I tend to believe it's the package that they're bringing to this track. I also maybe think it's partially the track too. It's just maybe the type of racing that we are now going to see at Atlanta, where the outside line is just because of how narrow it is and how big the side draft, how big of a side draft you can get on the outside. The outside line is just always going to be preferred, and you're pretty much going to see mostly single file racing for many, many years to come until this track really gets worn out. And maybe when the track gets worn out, the inside line will become a thing. I tend to think, though, the more the track gets worn out, the more the outside becomes a preferred line. I hate to be that guy, but the more I think the track gets worn out, the more I think the outside line becomes a preferred line, which kind of has me pretty worried. And I get that there... Here's the only other thing I'll say to defend this track, because I'm not sitting here saying that the Atlanta track is an absolute, it's terrible, it's the worst thing ever, because I can't lie, it has kind of grown on me a little bit. I'm not sitting here saying that I don't miss old Atlanta. Trust me, this is not some hot take where I'm like, fuck old Atlanta, it sucked ass, the new Atlanta is awesome. I'm not sitting here saying that. if you were to ask me what I would take Old Atlanta over New Atlanta 100 times over. But I have to point out, like, Old Atlanta wasn't drawing the crowds. A lot of the times, guys would get really strung out, and it wasn't always the greatest racing. And right now, NASCAR is in this big flux of just trying to find, like, as close to racing as it possibly can with the most entertainment value, and that's the main ticket that they're trying to find. And seeing how that race ended, Cup Series race, is night and day, obviously, from the first two races that we saw that weekend, but the main thing is that you saw a good finish. The middle portion of the race, I can take it or leave it, but the ending, that was very, Brad Keselowski said it perfect. That was very good super speedway racing, and more specifically what he said was, you can have veterans race clean at super speedway, like race clean in this type of racing, not have anybody wrecked at the end, and still see an entertaining product. And that's exactly what they gave us. That's why I give Joey Logano full credit. I give Brad Keselowski full credit, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, everybody else who was up at the front at the end of that race. Everybody who raced it clean to the end there, 100% full credit. I feel bad for Brad Keselowski because, like I said, he's led every single race this season, which is insane to think about. Like, every single race so far this season, Brad Keselowski has led a lap in every single race. And for him to be that close, it was kind of like that Corey LaJoie moment. Either it was last year or 2 years ago at Atlanta, where he was so freaking close. He got so freaking close to getting that first win. I want to say it was maybe last year. He got so freaking close to getting that first win. And Chase Elliott ended up winning, and you felt so bad for Corey because he got so close. But, like, you felt more bad for Brad because, sure, you know, he didn't get wrecked out like Corey, but, like, he was that close. Like, he finished second, and he was that freaking close to getting that win. And for him, for how much he struggled last season, I really hope that Brad is one of those guys that gets a win this season. I don't know where it happens. I don't know when it happens. I tend to believe that it probably is going to happen at the super speedway. Maybe it comes at Talladega in the next how many weeks or so until when Talladega comes around. Maybe it happens then. Maybe it happens at a different track that I can't think of off the top of my head that I would think he would win. I don't know. Maybe he finds some success at a different track. I don't know. I would tend to believe because Brad's one of those super speedway guys. He might get a win at a super speedway this year, and that's maybe how he gets himself into the playoffs. But for how well that 6 car is done, and I know that the 17 got wrecked out, and I'll talk about Ross Chastain's wreck here in a second, but I know that the 17 got wrecked out in that wreck, and his day got ended there. But even the 17, although he's not leading laps like the 6 has this season, he still had speed at spots. He's obviously, like last year, it was the 17 car was the car for RFK, and the 6 was the second car in that line. Like, team orders went with the 17 was the number 1 car, and the 6 was the number 2. This season, it seems like it's flip-flopped, where Brad has had an amazing start to this season. Like I said, he's led at least a lap at every single race so far. And even at times where, like, Las Vegas is a perfect example, or Phoenix is a perfect example, where the Fords struggled, but if you were to ask me who are the 2 Fords that through those 2 races seemed to be the best for most of the races, I'd say Kevin Harvick won, and Brad Keselowski was number 2. Like, there were points during that Las Vegas race where Joey Logano couldn't even crack the top 15. And Blaney was up there at points. Blaney was running top 10 at points as well. But as far as consistently running the best across those couple races where Ford really struggled, it was Kevin Harvick was number 1, mostly just because of how fast he was at Phoenix. And Keselowski was number 2. Keselowski was one of the faster Fords. So look out for Brad. And Brad's technically points, like if the playoffs were to start today, he'd be points into the top 16. But I still think that 6, even if he doesn't win, can points his way in if he continues to have these great runs. We'll see how it goes the next couple weeks or so, because we got some different tracks coming up here that might be a bit more of a challenge for Brad, but we'll see how it goes. I still think that he's a guy who can points his way in. But let's talk about Ross Chastain here really quick before we end the show. Like I was saying, though, as far as wrecks that happened in the Cup race, obviously Bubba Wallace, he spun out on his own. Eric Almirola blew a tire in front of Larson, and Larson had a pretty hard hit there into the driver's side. So again, Larson was having another good day. But the other wreck that happened was obviously the Ross Chastain, Kevin Harvick wreck coming out of Turn 2. That one was the one that kind of caused the quote-unquote big one, if you will, because it happened right in front of the field. So I understand that there are some people, and it is a valid thing. There's a contingent of fans who are saying right now that Ross Chastain obviously didn't wreck Kevin. Kevin got loose all on his own and spun out on his own, and it wasn't Ross Chastain's fault. The other contingent of fans that I've seen, again, this is on Twitter, so this is, not the greatest group of people that I want to poll, but the other contingent of fans on the other side of that are saying, well, Ross Chastain, although he never actually touched him, he packed a ton of air on Kevin's car, and that got him loose. So he pretty much was still way too aggressive and still pretty much spun him out. Even though he never actually touched him, he packed so much air on him that spun him around, so Ross Chastain is still being way too aggressive. Here's the thing. I understand the second contingent of fans, the fans who think that Ross Chastain is the worst driver on planet Earth. It seems like everybody thinks that contingent of fans online think that Ross Chastain is almost like the devil or something. Like he's like everybody's worst enemy on track, and that like everybody hates him. Those contingent of fans, they have some sort of screw loose, but they are right in the sense that, let's be honest, Ross did cause Kevin Harvick to spin. He never actually touched him, but that is a thing with these cars, is that if you can pack, you can have so much momentum. And remember that there's that big pocket of dirty air behind that car. You can pack so much air on the back end of that car that it can upset it. And if you, as we know with this next-gen car, if you start to lose it, you cannot save it. You saw how fast Eric Almirola's car went around when he blew that tire. It was really quick, and there's no chance of him saving it. I'm behind on some of my podcasts, but I just listened to the Tyler Reddick episode when Tyler Reddick went on Dale Jr.'s podcast, and he was talking about how, this with this car still, if you start to lose it, it's almost worse to try and recorrect it. Because if you try to recorrect it, you can't save it. This car is so snappy with the rocket pinion that if you try to save it, there's no way you can get it recorrected back to try and keep it going straight. If you try to turn the wheel back right, it'll catch and it'll shoot back up the track, and you'll have something even worse where you go head on into the wall. So this thing is not something that you can save. If it starts to lose it, you've lost it. Now, very rare occasions, some guys can start to lose it and save it, but I don't want to say it's, the most skilled, but like some people can maybe save it. I'd say guys like Kyle Busch, guys like Tyler Reddick, guys like Kyle Larson, guys who are used to being that sideways, I'd say even like a Joey Logano. Guys who can be that sideways and skilled enough and are used enough to being that sideways and be able to keep it corrected and keep going straight and not lose it all the way around. Kevin, maybe he's skilled enough to do that, but I think that Kevin, he's smart enough to know, as I don't think Tyler Reddick is the only guy who knows that. I think that Kevin Harvick also knows, like, if I try to recorrect it back, I'm going to go head on into the wall, and I might, have a way worse hit than if I just try and keep it straight, turn left, just slide it down the track, hopefully get a caution and not hit anything. But that obviously isn't what happened. But again, back to my original point. The thing about the Ross Chastain thing, though, is he got such a run that he did slow up. Go back and watch the clip. For the people who are the Ross Chastain, I hate using the word haters, but for the people who are the Ross Chastain haters, who just think he's just the worst driver on the planet, go back and watch that clip and just look at it from a neutral point of view. Don't look at it through your hate glasses of you not liking Ross Chastain because maybe you're a Denny Hamlin fan or something. Just look at it from a base, unbiased opinions view and take Ross Chastain out of the car and put anybody else in that car. You'd see that they had such a run on the bottom getting up to Kevin that when they got to Kevin, they're in the middle of the corner, he has to try and slow up. He's trying not to hit him. He's trying not to hit him because he knows he's coming through the transition of turn 2. It's not smart to hit guys through the corner. That was the other thing that you saw in the 2 previous races. For some insane reason, both the guys who ran trucks and Xfinity thought it was a smart idea to bump draft through the corners. When was it ever a good idea to try and hit somebody and bump draft through the corners anywhere to super speedway? When? I'd love to know when those guys got that memo, that it was okay to just bump draft and lay on somebody's bumper through the corners. Because as far as what I've seen in my experience of watching these races, usually anytime somebody tries to bump draft through the corners, regardless of whatever car, whatever series, or whatever track or wherever, it usually doesn't end well for the guy who's getting bumped. Just a point of view that I saw. So, Ross, knowing that, he went into the turn, he came in through 1 and 2, like I said, got such a run up to Kevin. I really think that he didn't want to hit him because he knows if he hits him, it's going to turn him. So he tries to get as close as he can. He tries to slow up, but he doesn't want to hit the brakes because momentum is such a big thing. So he gets up to him, and he gets so close that he pushes so much air in that back end that it starts to step out, and then once it starts to step out, it's over. So the contingent of fans who are just like, Ross Chastain strikes again, he's wrecking more people, blah, 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 blah. In that case, that is a biased point of view. That is the people trying to look for something that isn't there. There is nothing that Ross Chastain, I think, did there wrong. I think, personally, it is just a racing incident. And that's why even Kevin has seen all the shit that has happened between Ross and Denny. Everybody's seen it. Everybody has made jokes about it. In that same podcast I listened to with Tyler Reddick, he made a joke where he was like, I'll be driving down the highway and I get cut off by somebody and I'll say, I got Rossed. Or I don't know if he say, I got Rossed, or he said, I got Chastained, or something like that. And that's a joke among the garage because Chastain has gotten into plenty of people over the last year or so. So it's a running joke. So it's not like Kevin doesn't know that this is a thing with Ross. So Kevin, as a very experienced driver, knows that he saw that clip. He goes, that wasn't really Ross's fault. That's just a driving incident. He's not going to sit there and go, Ross had no fault in it whatsoever, because Ross did get up to his bumper. If Ross didn't get up to his bumper, that probably wouldn't have happened. But he also knows and understands, he didn't mean to wreck me. That's a racing incident. We'll move on from that. So the people that are out there, just lambashing Ross Chastain because of, all this shit that happened with Denny Hamlin last season, and everybody's saying he's a, overly aggressive driver, and, everybody acting like he's the devil. You have to understand that most of the stuff that Ross does is aggressive driving, yes. Is it with malicious intent to try and, I'm trying to take this person out? I truly believe that not one time, especially last season, not one time has he went into a corner, gotten into somebody, well, usually Danny Hamlin, we'll just say Danny Hamlin, gotten into Danny Hamlin and purposely and maliciously attempted to spin him out. Not one time. I don't believe that. I think it's just how Ross has raced. And if you go listen to the Danny Hamlin podcast where he talks about, he had a sit-down lunch with Ross Chastain and he learned a lot about Ross. And the one main thing that he pointed out was growing up, that's just the type of environment that Ross raced around, was guys being super aggressive. And so you're almost conditioned to where the only way you're going to find success is being as aggressive back. So if that's the type of environment that you've learned to race in, is this super aggressive environment where you have to push and you have to be aggressive, you have to, be willing to push guys out of the way, and that's the only way you're going to find success, it's hard to break old habits. And trust me, I'm not one to sit here and go, well, he needs to ship up or shape, he needs to shape up or ship out. Like, I'm not one of those people. I'm one of those people that honestly doesn't want Ross to change. I'm like Dale Jr. I don't want him to change because we already see too many Jeff Burtons and Mark Martins out on the track anyways. We need a Dale Earnhardt. We need somebody who's willing to rattle somebody's cage. We need somebody I'm not sitting here saying that Ross Chastain is the next Dale Earnhardt. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you need somebody to be the antithesis to everybody else. You need somebody to be able to play that other role. You can't always have everybody is the same. You can never have something where like everybody drives the exact same, everybody has the same personality, everybody does the same thing, and everybody thinks the same thing. That's boring. That's not fun. Because if everybody does the same thing and everybody runs the same way and everybody does the same exact shit, then nobody is different from anybody else. So why would I cheer for one person over the other? Why would the casual viewer like one person over the other if everybody's the same? So you need guys like Ross Chastain who are aggressive, who are willing to make those moves, who are willing to make the bump to push you out of the way, who are willing to take chances and do things that others aren't willing to do. Because if you don't have those guys, then what you have is the last how many years that we've had without Ross Chastain, where everybody is the same and everybody is, racing the same exact way, and you get the boring races. That's my only point, is like, don't sit here and wish for Ross Chastain to be like everybody else. And I pray to God that Ross never falls back into that same fold like Brad Keselowski did. If you remember when Brad Keselowski won his championship in 2012, he was hated. He was hated. People hated the way he drove. Does nobody remember? I think it was 2013, question mark? Maybe it was 2012. Yeah, it was 2013, sorry. In 2013, I want to say it was at Charlotte, maybe. I'm taking a total guess. The big fight between Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski, where Brad Keselowski split Jeff and Jimmy 3 wide, got into Jeff, ends up cutting his tire. Jeff goes up to him, gets mad at him, and starts fighting him. Big legendary moment. You need to have guys like Brad to bring out the personality in guys like Jeff. If there is no Ross Chastain to bring the personality of Danny Hamlin out, then it's not as fun. Then Danny Hamlin isn't as fun and entertaining to listen to or watch. If there's nobody like Joey Logano years ago to bring the personality out of Tony Stewart and get Tony Stewart mad at him and wanting to fight him, then Tony Stewart isn't as fun to listen to and watch anymore. You need guys who are the antithesis of others to bring out the personality of these drivers. The drivers just can't, like Ryan Blaney can't just bring out his personality just out of thin air. It's pretty obvious. Unless it is pulled out of him, then he's going to be the guy, I'm sorry, but kind of monotone in front of a camera. Not everybody can be like Bubba Wallace, where, like Bubba Wallace, it almost seems like he loves the camera, where he's willing to turn it on for the camera and show his personality just off of instinct. Some guys need to have somebody almost pull it out of them, pull that emotion out of them. And that's where you get the entertainment and the fun, and that's where you're able to get people invested in certain drivers, is when their emotions are pulled out and their personalities are pulled out to be showed in front of the world. Because certain people who like certain personalities and drivers will be able to actually see their personalities, see how they react, see their emotions, and be able to then become a liken to those certain drivers. That's why Kyle Busch, no matter how much he's hated by some, he is loved by others, because for a long time there, his personality got pulled out and put in front of a camera. And it is very polarizing. I was one of those people who for many years thought, he's kind of a baby. He's kind of a man-child. But I'm not everybody. Some people liked his personality and liked the way he was in front of a camera and found it entertaining. And that's why Kyle Busch did get a pretty big fan base, and he still does have now, as he is now transitioned back into not so much emotional in front of a camera and now more just himself. Those same fans that were fans of him before stay fans of him, but now when people see the other side of Kyle and not such the emotional side, not the man-child side, now people start to like him a little bit more. And now his fan base has grown. Did you listen to the reaction at Fontana? He got a hell of a lot of cheers now, didn't he? This isn't hard to understand. This isn't hard to learn. And yet for some reason, everybody just wants to be the exact same. And this is something that I will never understand. This is why it pains me when guys like Cole Custer get in front of a camera and they just sit there and they're just so monotone, and it's just like talking to an AI robot. And it's not his fault. It's just kind of how he is, but it's some guys need that extra push to pull their personality, to pull their emotions out of them. Some guys need that extra push. Some people can't just pull it out on their own. Some people need a little bit of help. And that's why guys like Ross Chastain and guys like Joey Logano and other guys who are willing to be aggressive and willing to take chances and willing to, push on other drivers, they are important because they pull, like I said, they pull personality, they pull emotions, they pull the curtain back on who a driver really is and who their personality is and who they are and blah, 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 blah. So that's my whole point. Do not poo-poo on guys like Joey Logano and Ross Chastain. You may not like them personally, you may not like their personality, but don't poo-poo on them just because you don't like their personality. Maybe you need to take a step back and understand that they do have an important role in the sport. Above all else, just the ability to pull out other people's emotions, pull out other people's personalities, and help showcase them to all the viewers. It is an important thing. So, anyways, that was the Cup Series race. Like, I didn't even mention, Joey Logano won the Cup Series race. So, congratulations to him. But I'm going to shut it down for the show. I think that was a pretty good rant to end it on. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all enjoyed. If any of you made it to the end of this podcast, I appreciate you as always. Like I said earlier on, I don't know if I'll get all the other podcasting platforms done this week, but definitely this weekend I will get it all set up, and then next week's show will be on all the other podcasting platforms I can possibly put it on. Again, follow me on all of my social media, links in the description. It's on that one link. It'll say Linktree/StuckInNeutral. And I'll have all my links there. It has the link to my YouTube channel that you should be on right now, my Instagram, and my Twitter. I've been more active on Twitter, so go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. That's the other thing I failed to mention at the beginning of the podcast. I want to start posting more on Instagram, because, like I said, Twitter is just such a cesspool, and it's just no fun. Like, just listening to people or seeing people's posts and some of the stuff they say, it's such a downer, and it just makes me feel like the community of NASCAR fans is abysmal. But I have to remind myself, I'm like, that's just Twitter. It's not just NASCAR fans that are like that. That's just Twitter overall, and I have to kind of remind myself of that. But again, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all enjoyed this week's podcast. Next week, we will be going to COTA for the Cup Series race, and I want to say Xfinity Series race. I don't believe the trucks are going there, and I'm not even going to look. I'm like 99% sure the trucks aren't going there, so I'll only have 2 races this next weekend at COTA. A lot of new faces showing up for COTA this weekend. Jimmy Johnson's going to be in the race. A couple more road racers. I know there's somebody for some F1 racers showing up. I can't remember his name to save my life. Jordan Taylor is racing for the 9 car this week. That's one person I did remember. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those road course ringers do this weekend in the Cup cars. But besides that, like I said, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all enjoyed this podcast. I actually felt like this was a pretty good show. So, hey, and also, I'm not somebody big to say, subscribe, like, share, all that other shit. But, hey, share it around. If you liked it, leave a comment. Tell me you liked it. If you didn't like it, tell me you didn't like it. And tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you disagreed or agreed with me on. I will definitely read it. So, I will see you all next week. Hopefully COTA is a decent race, but I'm not having my hopes too high. But hopefully it'll be good. Thank you all so much for listening again. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you all next week.